How you doing, sir? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, okay. I guess I was muted here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. You're bouncing around a little bit.
Oh, I'm moving my camera right now. I'm trying to pin the video so that it records you. Hold on one second. Give me grief. I think they changed a few things on here. Hold on one second. Pin. Trying to make sure you don't disappear when I talk.
Ooh, that would be fun. Okay.
Hold on one second. Sorry about that. Where did it go? Well, I guess it's just doing it automatically, but I don't like to. Whoa, you got that background. That's cool.
That work?
That's very neat. Yeah, I like that a lot.
All right, we'll stick with that one then.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I guess it's working. It says, I guess we'll see. Seems like it is. So we'll let it be. Okay. Moving my camera over here. See, I'm gonna be on a green screen and I'm just using your video feed for you, basically. And then I'm gonna green screen us into something like really cool. Actually, okay. Do you have a green screen behind you?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, so that's just some kind of a effect on Zoom?
That's you can change out the backgrounds on Zoom. I usually just use blur, but depending on what I'm doing, I've got a couple other ones I can throw in there.
That's neat. Okay.
You can add your own, of course. But.
That's neat. Okay. So we're just cool. That looks very good. A lot of those are kind of sketchy, but that one's not like blurry or messed up or anything. That's very
good.
Okay. So we're already going. So I'm just gonna say hey, like we just saw each other just now, and then just go from there if you're ready.
As you wish.
All righty. Hey, Mr. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing really, really fine.
Great. What you been up to lately?
Well, let's see. About 2 weeks ago, we just finished the Living Dead weekend in Pittsburgh. That's 3 days at the Monroeville Mall, where Dawn of the Dead was filmed. That's the film I was in as the helicopter zombie. And my scenes were done at the airport, but the mall is where most of Dawn of the Dead was filmed. So to have a convention with 6 stores filled with nothing but guests from all the Romero movies and vendors, and then the courtyard area in the mall, that's where they have a bust of George Romero, who was the director of Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, and a lot of other of the Deads. That's in the court area. And they also have a stage set up, panels, demos. They had a demonstration of somebody who got hit by a truck, broken in half. They did that makeup on stage. So there are a lot of really cool things going on.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did it go? You enjoyed have you been doing a lot of the festivals and Comic-Cons and that kind of stuff lately?
Well, over the last couple of years, I'd gone from doing maybe 12 a year. And then I don't know if I did even any 2 years ago. And then last year I did one. So this year, just kind of getting started. I did one in Syracuse the week before Living Dead weekend, and that was a good time. That was kind of more of a comic con with a lot of comic artists. Comic cons have been sort of a broad brush title for a lot of events that might cover film, they might cover toys, they might cover comics, they might cover writers, they might cover artists. So you're never quite sure what you're going to get.
Yeah, that sounds so fun. I am a huge fan of Dawn of the Dead, and I love horror movies in general. I was studying more about it because of this interview, and I didn't realize how highly appreciated that film was. Like, it's in like the top 100 best movies of all time, and your death scene is like the top 10 zombie deaths of all time. Like,
sure, that's 40 some years ago. So a lot of films have been made since then. So to be able to hold that ranking over those years, at one time, I think my death scene was one of the 5 top zombie death scenes of all times, and now it's one of the top 8. So I'm still good with that. No, I've traveled to Germany a couple times to do shows, to the UK several times for conventions, and there you meet fans from all over Europe, Japan, Canada, all through the United States. There are fans all over from Dawn of the Dead. It's been translated into so many languages. And in a lot of countries, you'll find posters in those languages, everything from like Thailand to Italy to wherever. And so just to be part of something that's so fantastically widespread and so well known, it's been an honor.
Yeah, I was talking to my dad about this interview that I had with you and how I was so excited about it and some of the stuff that I had learned while I was doing research for this. And I was talking to him about how it was so beloved, and he's never seen it. He's not a big monster movie guy, but he was like, why? Why does everybody like it so much? And I was like, well, I think it's because a smart person made it and actually thought about what it would actually be like and actually put a lot of thought into it. I compared it to like the Terminator, which could have easily been a really silly movie, but they sat there and figured out the time travel theories and all that kind of stuff. So a smart person can sit there and go, like, there are all these different ideas that you can go deeper and deeper with it. Like, the deeper you go, the deeper there is to go with all the thinking about what it would actually be like, So I think it's a very well-made film and a smart film.
Well, a lot of people, Josh, have asked me, well, when you were involved with the making of Dawn of the Dead, did you know it was going to be this worldwide sensation and a cult favorite? And my answer is always, nobody has a clue, because it's not up to the director. It's not up to a particular actor or the entire ensemble of actors, the crew, the producers. It's not up to them whether or not it becomes a hit movie. It's up to the fans. So you have to do something besides just put on a pretty show. You have to have something that really people can identify with and get pulled into and have fun with, and maybe come away with both an appreciation for the film, but some of the concepts that it's talking about. There was, the whole social aspect that George Romero put into his films. It's something that we live on a day-by-day basis with. In fact, George Romero, who directed all these, was asked once on a radio show, well, why do you think zombies are so scary? I mean, there's Dracula, there's Godzilla, there's all these monsters. Why are zombies so scary? And George's answer was pretty simple. He said, it's because they're your neighbors.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. And also, zombies represent death because there are real, like, if someone dies, that's what they're going to look like eventually. They're not up moving around yet, but, that
Mhm.
there are real things that look like that. If a dead person's laying there, eventually they're going to rot and they're going to look exactly like a zombie. So it's kind of I think it's a primal fear of death that makes zombies so scary.
Well, that's why the people who were alive run away from them.
Right. So I wanted to ask you this. Outside of the movies that you are in yourself, what's one of your favorite movies or a couple of your favorite movies?
Oh, have to say Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh my gosh. I love that so much. I literally have like a shrine to Creature from the Black Lagoon in my room. I made it myself. I got all of the autographs of the original actors and
With Hugh Browning and yeah. Mhm.
Ben Chapman.
And Chapman, excellent. I missed him while he was still with us, but Julie Adams.
Yes, I have all their autographs, and I have like this giant canvas, and the canvas is covered in like all this seaweed and stuff like that. And it has like figures coming out of it, and I have all the autographs like pinned inside there, and I have the posters all over my room. I didn't realize how much, like, every once in a while you have one of those self-aware moments, and you're like, "Wow, I just have a complete room full of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
black."
Well, let me
I,
throw a question at you, Josh. You asked about Dawn of the Dead and its popularity, and I said I like Creature from the Black Lagoon. You got very excited because you obviously have a liking for the creature, and there are different sites out there just of people who like Creature from the Black Lagoon. Why do you think that is?
I think that for me personally, there's a reality to it for some reason. I guess some horror movies are very, very far-fetched, but that one, I mean, there's probably not actually a gill man, but there are animals and creatures that we're not aware of. And also the filmography, like, I always think about him swimming underwater, and those are just such beautiful shots to me. I don't know why I love them so much, but I just love the way it looks. And I think it's something like that. It's kind of like with zombies. There could be, like, there probably aren't going to be zombies, but there is death, and there are things that look like that. And also there are creatures that we're unaware of, in places we've never been. And so it's possible to find creatures out there, out in the world. So maybe it's something like that. I don't know. What do you think? What do you like about it?
Oh, I think you hit on a lot of good things. One is the cinematography, the characters. You have kind of good guys, bad guys. They have a little conflict going on, but the creature just he wasn't necessarily intruding on somebody else's space. Coming out of the water or out of the jungle just to attack cities or something. He just was kind of protecting his lair and the heritage. So if you remember, there's this claw embedded in the cliff that they're digging out and trying to identify. Well, if it's embedded in a cliff, that gives you an idea that that's been around for a very, very long time, that as a species. And so, there's always this push-pull of we should catch this thing and put it in a cage, or we should let it go on in its natural environment and see what happens. Maybe we could study it that way, or we should open it up and see what's inside. And I think the way the creature kind of defends his lair, his lagoon, is something any of us might try to do too. And in a sense, it sort of flips the whole, who are the real creatures here? I mean, is it the creature from the Black Lagoon who's just kind of minding his own business until these intrusive people come in? Or is it these people who want to, shoot him, capture him, cage him, do whatever they want to do with him? And so I think there's a lot more sympathy for the creature in that case than there are for most of the other actors who were involved in the film.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he is very he never seemed like a mean, like an evil creature or anything like that. He seemed really chill, but people were like attacking him and kidnapping him and stuff like that, you know. So I always thought he seemed nice in better circumstances, you know. But so you're in Dawn of the Dead, and were you an actor before that? What was going on in your life at that time that brought you into that? How did you end up in that movie?
Well, it's kind of a convoluted series of circumstances in a way. I'd been working in theater, live stage productions in the Pittsburgh area, and we had a traveling repertory company. We were everywhere from Chicago to Boston to North Carolina to Scotland, doing performances. So I was used to being, you know, on camera. Well, I wouldn't say on camera, but in the eyes of people. And the other thing was, Tom Savini and I had been in college together. Tom did all the makeup and special effects for Dawn of the Dead. And in college, we had a separate alternative kind of theater company, and we worked together on that. After college, we both went into the Army. Tom went in as a combat medic or as a combat photographer in Vietnam, and I went to Vietnam as a combat medic. So we had our own different experiences of what real gore was like, and what effects things could have on the human body. It's a heck of a laboratory to study those sorts of things. But after we came back, I worked for a couple of years and then decided to go back to Pittsburgh. I wasn't originally from there, but I ran into Tom, and Tom said, "Hey, I've got this great role. George Romero's doing a movie." And another one, you know, since he did Night of the Living Dead about 10 years earlier, this is going to be a big one, and I've got a great role for you. So I knew Tom, and you know, you have to trust the people who you've worked with, who you've been friends with, and you've had experiences with. So I kind of went with it. I made it over to his workshop where we did the head castings to get all the prosthetics together. And a couple of weeks later, I showed up on set and got made up there, and waited around a day watching a movie get made until the helicopter came in the next day and there wasn't any more rain coming down. Then the rest sort of became history.
Yeah. See, I had read that you were friends with Tom Savini. I've been doing the show for about a year now, and he pops up quite often with other people that I've interviewed, like a legend. Like, it's so crazy that you just happen to know him. I did an interview with the guy that played Jason Voorhees, and he had done the makeup for that as well, and like a million other things.
Ari Lehman?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. He's a good friend too.
Wow, you got a pretty cool club.
Well, you know, nice. We go to, let's say, a film convention or horror convention. I'd say there's somebody from Friday the 13th. Oh, you know, there's Freddy Krueger. Whoa, there's the creature from. So unless you're just so shy, you just kind of hide from everybody. You got to go over and say hello, and right. You know, talk to them about film and what they did, and tell you know that whether you enjoyed it. You say, I really like you in that role, and you get. You know, you do that a couple times over the years, and you get to know people, and you know, socialize a little bit. Everybody's on different schedules. They live in different places. So oftentimes the conventions may be the only place you get back together.
Right. Like a little family reunion.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Yeah. I like Ari a lot. He's a very nice guy. I want to meet Tom at some point. Like, I would love to talk to him. I'm in awe of the work he's done. So you knew him from a theater company?
Well, as I said, we were in college together, both studying journalism in Pittsburgh.
Oh, wow.
And although the school owned the Pittsburgh Playhouse, they had a theater program But since we were in journalism, but we wanted to do acting, we were part of a group that formed its own theater company inside the school without being part of the Pittsburgh Playhouse. So we did a number of pieces. Tom and I actually did a two-person play together, Zoo Story by Edward Albee. And that was an interesting experience too. I like Tom. He's, he always had a lot of energy and immense talent. And, as soon as Star Wars came out, bam, he went and built himself a Darth Vader outfit. I mean, you'd say, well, you couldn't find that on the shelf somewhere. And I think that's one of the strengths Tom always had. It didn't have to be something that was out there that you picked up and put on. It just had to be something that was, bam, in his head. If you can see it, visualize it, then you can find ways to create those materials and create that look. And I think that's what gave Tom an edge when it came to something like Dawn of the Dead. And he was in charge of so many different special effects. I mean, bam, one after another. And to do all of those safely, with interest, with ingenuity, and oftentimes using new materials or using old materials in new ways. And to literally be able to pull it off, I thought was pretty awesome.
Right. He's very, very creative. Like, I've read a little bit about like what he was using to make y'all's makeup and the effects and stuff, all very impressive and creative. And it comes across great. It all looks amazing. How long were you in the makeup chair?
Well, as I said, I went to Tom's workshop and he had to make a full head cast. So he did it the front and the back separately. And so when he did the front, he uses a kind of a plastic material called alginate, which fills in all of the details. But literally you're breathing through a straw while that happens.
Ooh, I've done that.
So that has to firm up. Once that firms up, then the plaster goes over top of that, because the alginate itself is flexible to pick up the details in your face, but it will also just kind of flop down on a table because it is so, in a sense, fluid. And then, so breathing through a straw for like half an hour or so, something like that. Again, you got to trust the people you're working with because your nose is closed off and you can't see, you really can't hear. Or your communication with the outside world is through that straw, and you're trying to be still until it all hardens and firms up. But we did that, and a couple of days later, Tom gave me a call and said, "Jim, we're going to have to do it again. The plaster cracked."
Oh no.
So, well, I had the time, so we did it. And we did the recasting, and I liked it about as much as I did the first time. And from that, he made the head, made a bust of my head, and was able to, take his time working on the prosthetics and put materials together on the plaster bust that might have been, a little angry to the skin if it went directly on the skin. But so he could make all of these things that firmed up, and then he could take those pieces. And then when I got to the small airport outside of Monroeville, where you see in the picture behind me here with the helicopter and the boxes and the little pad, and there's a little administration building, and inside that building is where all the makeup was being done. So I went in and got set up. It was my first time on a film set, so I had no idea who anybody else was. I knew Tom, and that was about it. I later found that there were a number of people that I'd worked with in theater in Pittsburgh who were also in Dawn of the Dead. And that includes people like at the very beginning of the film, David Early and David Crawford, the two people who were arguing back and forth.
Mhm.
Nick Tallow, who's one of the raiders or the bikers, and a couple other folks that I'd worked with in theater. You know, they were in Dawn of the Dead also. But since their material or their scenes were done at the mall, I had no idea. I was on set for 2 days. And so I was in makeup, and then okay, next day we get in makeup again. And I guess it took, I don't know, maybe a little over an hour, hour and a half, something like that, to get into it, simply because Tom had to design the pieces to fit so well. And he was working also with Jeannie Jeffries, who's the blonde zombie from Dawn of the Dead. She was
Mm.
also doubling as a makeup assistant. So
Yep.
I'm pretty sure we've sort of agreed, even though we didn't know each other at the time, that she's the one who probably helped put all the finishing details on me after Tom, went over things with her.
Oh, cool. That's neat.
Mhm.
How did they make your head come off? How did they make the top of your head come off?
Magic, just movie magic.
What is
Um, the head bust that Tom made of me, he added about 1.5 inches at the top, which included like kind of a foam rubbery material, which was then cut into chunks. And so it was still, circular, whatever, but those chunks were threaded together with monofilament fishing line with space in between so that you had extra line in between. And then of course the hair was put on top and such. So when I climb up onto the boxes to get hit by the helicopter blades, which were animated in, by the way, I was not actually under rotating helicopter blades. Although at the time I could have well been. It's just, you get caught up in the moment. But using the same kind of clear monofilament fishing line off camera, somebody tugs onto the top of that, yanks it, and so it comes off in a series of chunks in a nice straight line, just like vroom. And behind these boxes that you see, Tom and one of his assistants were there with these hand pumps that were filled with the blood material. And there were tubes running up the back of my trousers, up the back of my shirt, back of my neck, to connect to the pieces of appliance that were embedded into these headpieces. So at that, it was a matter of very precise timing. When Tom gave the signal, that came off, they started pumping, and everything else just kind of flowed from there, so to speak, including all the blood. And fortunately, I looked over and, after I got up, and George was smiling and everybody looked very, very pleased. And then they went on to the next scene.
Wow.
So, it's a very momentous time for me. There's this anticipation and kind of figuring out what to do, and the makeup process, and watching everything else going on. And then it's over.
Right.
And in a
Wow.
sense, it's kind of like theater. Like you can rehearse for 6 or 8 weeks for a stage production, large or small, and you put all your energy into it. And the lines, all the lines from the beginning to the end, and your entrances and your exits, your movement, what you pick up, what you set down, how you turn. You have to keep all of this stuff going in your head on stage. And you put all this energy into it, and if it works, comes together as an ensemble, and people in the audience feel the energy, and they show their appreciation by applause. In film, you do this thing that later becomes very celebrated, and that's great. We're going on to the next scene. Because,
And then
in a way, it's the same thing, except that when the curtain comes together on the stage and you've taken your final bow, that's it. That energy is just kind of gone out into space and been part of the good things you've done, or the turkeys that you've done. And in film, the interesting thing is you don't get a lot of applause at the end of a scene or something, but it's there and it's been shown all over the place repeatedly. And, it's a different energy and a different process. There's still, so it's been fascinating to have been part of both worlds, as it were.
Right. It's like also you have all that energy built up for all this time being excited, and then it may be like a day or like a couple hours and then it's over. But I've noticed that the one way to relive it is like if you were to watch it at like a screening or something, and get everybody like,
Mhm.
whoa, like going nuts and stuff, like I'm sure
Yeah,
that's
it
really
all comes back that way. And when your scene's coming up and you think, how's the audience going to react? Most of them have already seen this movie a number of times, so they know what's going to happen. But I talk to people and I ask them, sometimes at conventions, well, what did you think the first time you saw it? I know you've seen it 100 times, and that's not unusual for some people. I know you've seen it 15 times, 20 times, 5 times, 10 times. What did you think the first time? We had no idea what was going to happen. But then we really looked for things and we appreciated all the more of everything that went into it. But, it's always that first time view that catches people by surprise. People were applauding, like when I got the top of my head lopped off. Some people were, ah, other one, whoa. There were just a wide range of reactions. I know George Romero was asked, we were doing a panel together in New Jersey once. And somebody asked, was that intended to be a comic moment? And he just kind of smiled. And he said, I forget his exact answer, but you could tell it was something that he was very pleased with because of a variety of kind of anticipations that he knew the audience would have had up to that point. And it's in a way a release. You go,
right.
oh, so they sit back and then the scenes continue. So, you get kind of drawn back in again. It's like playing a fish. I hate to say it that way, but that's what you do with the audience when you're a filmmaker. You bring them in and you set them back so that they can come back again. And so if you have like a horror film that is, I guess, unrelenting horror and violence and death, it's pretty boring, as well
Right.
as kind of revolting. It's like there's no humanity to it. There's no humor to it. There's no insight to it. It's just like, look, we can do these things. Let's do them and show them big on camera. Yeah, thanks anyway.
Right. I feel like that even more with CGI because when you made Dawn of the Dead, they didn't have stuff like that. So that took each shot that was an effect shot took a large amount of creativity because a lot of this stuff was done with things you can like have at your house probably. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like fishing line and, paint and stuff like that,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of creativity and a lot of thought put into each shot. And I really appreciate that.
Well, another consideration there is, let's say you and I are in a makeup chair and I'm putting makeup on you. And I think, okay, well, this thing's going to work. Yeah, it looks pretty good right now. On screen, your head is 10 to 15 times larger and every detail is going to show up. So what you do in that makeup chair has to cover everything. You can't say, well, he's a zombie. His face is all great. Wait a minute. His hands are white or his hands are black, whatever. I think they missed something in the makeup session. So, I have great admiration for people who do the makeup and special effects, because particularly for film, it has to show up if this camera zooms in on the actor and on that effect, on that performance. It's or otherwise people go, man, I can see where the makeup, stopped because they, well, that's good enough.
Yeah. Also, it has to stand up to the speculation of like everybody in the world, too.
Exactly.
And a lot of them are kind of picky about snobby. So
There may be a few like that. Yes.
That's funny. Yeah, I've never really thought about that. Like I've been in some movies and some TV. I didn't really ever think about like my head is going to be like 50 miles big.
It
I
seems
never.
that way. Seems that way sometimes. Yeah.
So have you been in, I guess since then you probably have, but have you been in close proximity to George Romero very often, or were you during the movie, or have you?
During the filming, George, of course, was handling most of the direction. But when it came to some of the effects, like my scene particularly, where Tom had been working on this kind of on his own, he told George what was going to be happening. George directed the first part of it, and by the first part of, I mean, my scene is when like I first appear on screen coming out under the wing of a helicopter, and a newspaper blows by. Well, George, got that together and sort of set the stage, and the walk across the field, intermittent shots of that. When it came to, climbing up on the boxes and things like that, and at that point, George turned it pretty much over to Tom, because Tom had his people in place and was able to do the cues and knew exactly what was supposed to happen. And they had to be in position. So Tom pretty much directed the scene of the helicopter zombie top coming off and the fall down and the other stuff. Well, I'd say once I started falling, there was no directing. Gravity took care of the rest of that. But so there was that, and I got a little bit of a chance to meet with him during a break, and he was very pleased, and I was very happy to be, part of it. Especially, I'd heard about, a lot of movie directors being very not paranoid, but very harsh at times on set, and you didn't want to make a misstep. But George wasn't like that. If you had ideas, you could offer them to George. He was very affable, very personable. And after Dawn of the Dead was released, I think within a year or two, I left Pittsburgh. And I hadn't seen George then for about 20 couple of years after that. And we were doing a convention in Maryland, and it was just amazing to me, because there was Night of the Living Dead cast, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, Survival of the Dead. And all of these people I kind of knew through the films, but it always amazes me that all of those people came together because George made the films. They became the stars they became because George cast them, or Tom cast them, put them in the films. And all of these films have become classics. And the rooms are just filled with these people from all the George Romero films. Well, I was in one room with Night of the Living Dead and somebody else, like another group of the Dawn folks. George was in another room. So I think it wasn't until like the late afternoon of the second day, I even had a chance to go over and see him. And I wanted to say hello. And the lines had gone down to him. I mean, lines were forming 2 hours before he even showed up. That's how popular George was at conventions, because he would also take time to talk with people, and everybody likes a little personal attention. And George, enjoyed hearing people's stories as well. But when I got to see him, he kind of looked at me, and I said, Jim Crut does, and he just, gave me a great big hug, and it was just fabulous. And he signed my Ultimate Dawn of the Dead DVD set.
Cool.
And it said something like, Jim, your scene cannot be not quite estimated, but it's been a few years, forgive me. But it was just so touching to me that, he picked up almost like from when we were doing the scene to when he saw me 20 some years later. It was that same joy that he had. And then I saw him at another convention in Gettysburg, and we had a chance to talk a little bit and, get a few photos together, things like that. But George has a lot, at the time, and anytime at a convention, always has a lot of demands. People were wanting something from him, whether a photo, autograph, or his agent says, you got to come over here and do this, or got to meet with these people, or we got to go and give you a break and get you away from all this. So it's not like, hey, well, why don't we just take the afternoon, have lunch, and chat a little bit. So you're kind of grateful for any time you did get together. And I was always pleased for that.
Yeah, I'm glad he's nice. It seemed like it was an absolute ball to be in those movies. Like, that seems like the most fun movie to be in ever. And then it seems like everybody's just, you get a bunch of creative people together and y'all just play and make up stuff and sit there. Because from what I read, it was a very open thing. Like, people were allowed to, like, Tom's allowed to sit there and mess with stuff and try to figure out a cool shot and just come up with it, and talk to George, and he'd be like, yeah, let's try that, so that sounds very fun and cool. So in your professional opinion, what are some tips if you're going to play a zombie? What is a good zombie tip? Like acting.
Good question, because Tom and I had never really talked about what it was like to be a zombie up until I got onto set. And then I was in makeup going out to the tarmac, and I said, Tom, he was just checking me for any last minute makeup things. He said, I said, Tom, do these zombies talk? I mean, I had not seen any of the other zombies. I didn't know what they did. Did they walk fast, slow, run, climb, jump? What did they do? Everybody's got a different interpretation. Tom said, well, just be the zombie you want to be. And so literally, I mean, I'd given it some thought, but between the makeup session, final makeup clearance, and then going on set, that's where I put together whatever characteristics I had. So I did a couple conventions, and at one of the conventions, Jeremy Ambler, who was one of the walkers in The Walking Dead, I said, Jeremy, The Walking Dead is very similar to the zombies portrayed in George Romero's films. Of course, Greg Nicotero, who's the executive director of Walking Dead, worked with Tom Savini. He knew George Romero. So he, I think, had been birthed in that approach to zombies, that they were regular people. They didn't suddenly become supermen. And I said, well, how about if we do a session, like a panel program of what I got in terms of training or direction on being a zombie, and you got for The Walking Dead. And we didn't really talk about it much, but we talked the convention promoter into letting us do it. We got, 50 people in the room. And we chatted a bit. And I said, excuse me, I said, Tom basically said, do the zombie you want to do. They don't really talk much, but I said, can I yell? Or, he said, yeah, do whatever you want to do. So it was like total freedom. And then Jeremy comes up and he talks about how they were screened for The Walking Dead. They were chosen kind of based on their looks, and then given certain directions. And they literally had a kind of zombie school on how you move, what you don't do. And okay, everybody, don't limp on your left foot. That's been done. Yeah, don't just do something that somebody else has done, but you need to kind of carry these basic moves and then put your own interpretation on them. So that's why even in Walking Dead, where you have hordes and hordes of zombies, there are differences, not just in the looks, but sometimes maybe the personalities. Maybe some of them are a little reticent, some of them are a little bolder, more active, more fierce, more, I'm going to get you by, bite your ankle or something. So we had a good response to that, and we asked people in the audience, do you want to try some of these moves? Who would like to try to be a zombie? And you bet. And so people would come up, and it's not that we critiqued them, but we said, based on the screening school that they had for Walking Dead, what you'd might want to do is not do that, but maybe do more of this. You could maybe tilt your head. You could do something odd. And I always felt from the perspective of if your body was falling apart, what muscle groups would be sort of the first to go that you would lose control over? And I did a convention in Germany a few years back, and we were doing this panel, like folks from, I think most of them were from Dawn of the Dead, and Eugene Clark was there from Land of the Dead. He did a gift to me. Everybody was given a microphone and introduced down the line. And it came to him handing the microphone to me. And he said, well, Jim, instead of just introducing yourself, why don't you show them how to walk like a zombie?
Cool.
So I've got all these people, maybe 100, 150, whatever in the audience. And everybody else has just introduced and said, my name is so-and-so. And I take the microphone. But I got to show them how to do a zombie walk. So anyway, we had a great time doing it. And I gave them a couple little tips. I said, here's one thing to do, and that is to be consistent. If you're doing something, say, with your left arm, well, how are you going to remember after all these people yell directions at you and such, and maybe change your makeup, and, oh, you have to move over here instead of over there? Which arm was it that was going to be twisted or close to get your body? I said, you could take an object like a ball or an orange, stick it under your arm. You're not going to forget what part doesn't move. And maybe that'll give you kind of a stiff arm look. You could put a pebble in your shoe, and it's going to hurt every time you take a step. And of course, you're going to remember what leg that was or what foot that was. So that's just a little piece of it. But if you can imagine yourself, gee, if I were no longer alive, but I had to move, where would my center of motion come from?
Right.
With your body, it's usually your core. So your core has to kind of be in charge. And all your appendages, your arms and your legs, they better go along with it. Maybe sometimes they'll flop around a little bit, but I don't know if that helps, Josh.
Yeah, it did a lot. I hadn't thought about a lot of that. That's very good. That's very interesting. So, is there anything that you want to tell the viewers about that you have coming up, or you want to let them know about any like website or anything like that?
Well, I can tell you about my website. That's Helizombie, HELIZOMBIE.com. And that has some of my upcoming appearances. And I've had a line of t-shirts and hoodies and tank tops and, autograph photos for autographing and things of that nature. Also, I'm on Facebook at Jim Krut, KRUT. And people can always friend me or just check out the site and see what's going on in my life.
Awesome. Well,
aside from that, I've got about 3 films that I'll be working on between now and the next couple of months. I can't really tell you much about it at this point.
Okay, that's great. Good for you. That's awesome. Well, thank you very, very much, Mr. Jim. It has been really, really fun talking to you, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Josh. It's been a lot of fun here too. Good luck and stay scared.
Thank you, sir. I'll see you later.
Whew.